morning, good afternoon, whatever time of day it may be to you. This is the 5th episode of 13 Minutes to Midnight. I titled this one Common Sense, Washington's Cabinet or Staff, and then Amen-Ra and a little bit of random in there. What I want to first start talking about is COVID-19. Can't avoid it. I don't want to go long into it. Common sense, people. I've seen countless things on this, non-essential, essential, common sense. The reason those things are out there is to limit the mobility of people going in and out. We had to literally close the playground because people wouldn't stay off the playground and keep contaminated or potentially contaminated. People understand the government's not out to get you, to keep you from going to church, anything like that. It's common sense. This thing spreads through human contact or close proximity. Stop complaining online. Essential, non-essential is simply essential those that are generally referred to as healthcare workers, grocery store, keeping the food supplies, keeping basic infrastructure going. Right or wrong, some businesses have done this effectively, others have not. I'm not going to disagree with that. But stop complaining online. Bottom line is, the quicker people adhere to guidelines from the CDC to stay out of contact and keep 6 feet away from people, stop group gatherings, the quicker this will go away. The longer people try to defy and be idiotic about this and do groups of 10 or more all around town or wherever you're at, this will prevail longer. So stop. Get off that. A couple other things. Google, I have it up there as the stop 5. Biggest ways you can help with this right now is wash your hands often. Elbow, cough, sneeze into your elbow. Quit touching your face. I'm a person that does that a lot too. Space, the 6 feet. Yes, in grocery stores, people, if you go shopping, which is fine to get food, supplies, whatever, keep distance. Don't be right up in someone's business. That's not good. Stop it. Especially if you're coughing and sneezing, then you probably shouldn't even be out at that point either. And then finally, stay home. Unless you're getting something that you absolutely need, food, maybe some supplies, whatever. Don't be going leisure shopping, going to get the nice new sweater or whatever it is. Stay home for the love of God. Come on. Don't be going congregating places. Like I said, playgrounds have been closed because people won't listen. That's why commissions do things that they do. Now, media. I'm going to talk about the media a little bit. Media is blowing things way out of proportion. This is a serious situation, but be careful if you listen to everything in the media. I remember 1946 when Truman was a re-elected president. The night before, in the morning of, they said Dewey was going to win. It was not a contest. It wasn't going to be close. Lo and behold, Truman won in a decent, I mean, it was close, but it wasn't like neck and neck win. Truman won in a decent margin. But the media didn't want Truman to win. They didn't like Truman. Fast forward to 2016, the media hated Trump, but they built Trump. And I remember looking on Yahoo News one day, literally 2 segments apart, Trump leading polls, Hillary leading polls, right next to each other. And so it's just like, be careful what you're looking at. The biggest thing right now is the United States has become the most predominant cases in the world. Couple thoughts on that. One, we're a very big country that's spread out. We have a lot of metropolitan areas such as New York, LA, etc. It's going to happen. Our population is like 4 or 5 times that of Italy. We're over 320 some million. Italy's at 60 some million. It's naturally going to be more than Italy. And then when they keep rating China's lied about numbers for years. Why are we to trust their numbers right now? I'm not saying they're not trying to be more transparent, which they're not. Those numbers are going to be skewed. So don't get all caught up on we're the most in the world with numbers. That was bound to happen, most logically. We're one of the biggest countries in the world outside of India, China. So just don't get freaked out by those numbers alone. And no, martial law is not coming. Unless people keep being stupid and don't listen to some basic guidelines. You see those transports of military people keep sharing on Facebook? I can tell you, assured, the National Guard, people are not mobilizing for martial law. If they're getting moved or anything, it's for helping with basic infrastructure things, such as helping at hospitals, setting up, building new hospitals, moving equipment and stuff like that, helping maintain some order, but not like going with guns and stuff around. No, not like that. So common sense, people, just pay attention. Okay, enough on that. Now let's talk about something I've been wanting to talk about for a little bit. I'm going to start going through each president's and their staff. We're going to start with one of my favorite presidents, and one of the presidents I rank highly up on the list, is President Washington. even outside of his military career. And I think Washington is a great leader, someone who saw through a lot of stuff, and really realized that his presidency would set the standard. Though a president's staff or the cabinet is not officially stated in the Constitution, it does give power for the president to appoint department heads or heads, confer. So what we really see here is the development of the president creating really 4 key positions that will morph into now 16 key positions that we call the president's cabinet. And the name cabinet comes from James Madison, referring to the president's cabinet, just kind of a collection of officials. The first one, vice president, though it's not officially a cabinet position, it's more the the backup to the president, it was John Adams. And John Adams detested the vice presidency. He thought it was kind of tedious, no point to it, which really, until modern times, the vice president's role was kind of mundane and, well, pointless. But they do serve a purpose in case the president does die, which that was not established until really the 60s with clarification. You thought it would make sense, but that's why they passed the, I believe it was the 24th, 25th Amendment, or 25th Amendment clarifying what happens in the event a president dies or is incapacitated. Then you have the 4 original. Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, though he's the most famous, it was technically John Jay was the initial Secretary of State for Washington for a very short period, but Thomas Jefferson is really the first true Secretary of State for the United States as far as longevity. And it was followed by Edmund Randolph and then Timothy Pickering. And then you have Secretary of Treasury, who was one of the first. I believe he was the first appointed one, and that's Alexander Hamilton, Washington's right-hand man, financial genius guru, a true Federalist, if you want to label him with that. And then he will be followed by Oliver Wolcott Jr., it looks like. Secretary of War, Henry Knox. Henry Knox was an American Revolutionary, I believe, general or colonel. Served from Washington, made sense, military experience. Secretary of War. Secretary of War no longer exists. It's been replaced by Secretary of Defense, which stands for Department of Defense, which encompasses all the military branches and their functions. So war was phased out and replaced after World War II, when our military became a huge entity, and a lot more moving parts. And then the Attorney General. The original Attorney General was Edmund Randolph, who you heard me say would serve later as Secretary of State, but Attorney General, chief lawyer for the United States. Really, it originally didn't oversee a department. Today, Department of Justice is overseen by the Attorney General, but originally it did not. So, looking at that, you have a very cabinet of very strong personalities. I mean, Washington, I want to say he's a strong personality, but he's Washington. He has the prestige of the American Revolution, etc. Strong leadership, owns the room when he comes in, and just his presence. He has Thomas Jefferson, who is anti-federalist, was not around when the Constitution was passed, didn't agree with a lot of the constitutional principles. Now he's forced to accept it. He wrote the Declaration of Independence himself, so he's got a lot of political views himself, is the opposite of Alexander Hamilton. And then you throw, John Adams in there, who often didn't come to the cabinet meetings. You have a very tense and often dynamic cabinet meetings when they do meet. So you see Washington created a cabinet that was not always yes man, because Jefferson would not just say yes. And in fact, when Jefferson left Secretary of State to be replaced by Edmund Randolph, who moved positions, you can see that Jefferson is starting to take shots at Washington indirectly. And he did this through the papers at the time. That's how you really communicate, was write an article and stuff. So Washington was a master of creating and holding down this original cabinet and kind of setting a precedent for later presidents. Cabinets really don't take on stronger roles really till the Civil War or later, but you can see that Washington set a standard. And it's interesting to study it because we often get caught up, Thomas Jefferson was the 3rd president, John Adams was the 2nd president, but we don't stop and think about their first roles in the government, which was in Washington's cabinet, which he kind of kept them all at bay. And then if you study history, which we'll talk a little more probably a little bit later, you can see them all kind of branch off and do their own thing. Okay, now shifting to our random or kind of our continuation. I've been going through Egyptian stuff a little bit. We talked about the crown representing upper and northern, which with the white and the red. Right behind me, I do a little quick doodle of him, Amen-Ra, the chief god of the Egyptians. And one thing to know about Amen-Ra, he's a combination of 2 gods, Amen and Ra. Amen was usually referred to something hidden, hidden god, and Ra was the sun god. As the Egyptian kingdoms morphed into one, just like the crown upper and lower, they combined these local deities of Amen and Ra into Amen-Ra to create basically a creator god, a supreme god of them all. Basically the sun god, if you want to talk about it, riding a chariot in the evening, coming and going. So just a little bit of, and this wasn't until like the 8th or 9th dynasty that they combined it. So this is not initially when the kingdoms unite, but it's a little bit later on. But you can kind of, it's interesting to see from a cultural standpoint how they combined two gods into one. And then what I'm going to end with today, random, very random, but it's keeping in with the COVID-19, is Typhoid Mary. Yesterday on This Day in History, I had Typhoid Mary finally arrested. She was an Irish immigrant who came to the United States, got married, was a cook, but she didn't understand. She was not sick, but she was a carrier for typhoid. She was an basically she didn't show any signs that she had it, but she wasn't sick, but she was a carrier, a healthy carrier. And she carried it around for years, and she was isolated twice. And she didn't understand that her hygiene, basic hygiene and isolation, and how she prepped food and everything was causing the spread. At least 53, if not more, people were infected because of her movement. It's kind of a sad story, because if you look at it, she's actually isolated for 30 years, and then she dies from pneumonia. Probably overkill on that regard, but it's an interesting case of someone not realizing that, hey, I'm a carrier, I'm getting people sick, I probably should isolate myself until A, I'm either declared healthy and clean, or figure something else out. So that's just something that interesting to show just how stuff can spread without people even realizing it. And that's so true in today's stuff, especially like when you send kids to school that are still sick, they infect other kids that are sick. And maybe they just got a little bit of cough, but kids are the worst, touching their face. I've got a toddler trying to instill that. So Typhoid Mary, don't be Typhoid Mary, just an interesting thing for today. Now, as you go about, stay healthy, keep eating, get outside, enjoy the weather. Just don't do it in large groups. Come on, common sense, but have fun while you're home, and take opportunity of this. I know it can be stressful, but this also could be a blessing. So just probably never gonna get this much time at home again. We're in quarantine day 10. Keep it going strong. Good night and good luck.